one person still connecting. Perfect. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first and perhaps last Metro Washington committee working session. We have a number of bills to talk about today. And why don't we start off, Delegate Foley, I don't want to put you on the spot, but your bill, I feel like, is probably most baked. So we'll start with yours, which is MCPG 109-23. The goal for this work group today is to get as far as we can on the number of bills that we have. Hopefully we can vote on some of these, but I realize that administratively we might not have all of the information that we need on one of those bills. And so it might take a little bit longer, but the hope is that we can get through this meeting today with a sense of kind of the directions that we're going in, and that people can leave with a sense of direction. So we've got a lot to get through today. We'll kick things off with Linda Foley. Tell us about this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I testified in the hearing, this is a pretty simple bill, unlike some of the others we're considering. It has to do with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. It's a bi-county bill. And I should say, for the record, I'm Delegate Linda Foley, representing District 15 in Montgomery County. As I originally submitted this bill, it was to delete the requirement in the bill that when the county council appoints commissioners, that not more than 3 shall be members of the same political party. So we're eliminating that requirement. And after consultation with the county council and the county executive's office, I did indicate that I was offering a sponsor amendment. I don't know if Rebecca said she was going to distribute the sponsor amendment to everyone. You should have it. And the sponsor amendment basically says this. In addition to deleting that language that I just cited, it now adds on page 2 in line 21 of the bill, before letter A, to insert, when making an appointment for membership on the commission, the county council of Montgomery County, and subject to section 15-103B of the subtitle, the county executive of Prince George's County shall consider the need for geographic, political, racial, ethnic, and gender diversity on the commission. And that basically mirrors the language that was proposed in another bill relating to the Liquor Licensing Board, so that the appointees better reflect the diversity of our county and the diversity of Prince George's County. So the county council and the county executive are favorable to this change. And my understanding is that the Planning Commission is not taking a position, but they are not going to oppose this. So with that, Madam Chair, I don't know whether it's appropriate at this session to move that we accept it, but whenever it's appropriate, I will move that we approve this legislation, but I'm also open to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Delegate Foley, for that succinct summary. I see Delegate Corman's hand up, so we'll open it up to conversation before we start voting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to slow us down on what's supposed to be one of the easier ones, but Delegate Foley, how would you respond to the question of the political party thing is very objective, right? You can look up and see what someone's political party is. And the other things that we're putting in place, if we adopt your amendment and remove the political party language, maybe they're not as sort of clear to see in some cases as the political party.
Well, that may be true, Delegate Corman. Thank you for that question. But I would say that the criteria are pretty objective. Geographic, okay, you can tell where someone lives. Political is still in there. Racial, ethnic, gender, those are all pretty objective markers, I would say. And I think, whether it's not a specific number, I think that would be difficult to say a specific number, in each of these categories. But I do think that, we have, in our case, a very diverse county council that represents all areas of the county. And I am confident that they can make a decision and recommend people that or a commission that reflects these factors. So while I understand that it's not quite as objective, I think the problem is that one objective measure does not really reflect the diversity of our county, which I personally believe is more important when selecting a commission that deals with land use and planning and zoning.
Could I ask a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Please.
Great. So first of all, I mean, the council is quite diverse right now. The last council had one woman, which I do not consider a diverse council, unfortunately. But my follow-up question is, we heard a lot in the testimony about people just switching their party. And I think often that means switching from a party to actually decline to state, as opposed to switching from, D to R or vice versa. So do you have any sense of how actually prevalent that has been at all from your work on this, or?
Are you directing that at me, Delegate Corner?
If you know the answer. If you don't know the answer, I understand. That was just something that was talked a lot about.
Yeah, no, Delegate Corman, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know it's possible. I don't know whether that actually has occurred, and maybe somebody who is more familiar with Madam Chair, maybe someone who's more familiar with the process and how it's operated in the past could answer that, but I can't.
Thank you, Delegate Foley. Of the folks who have been invited to provide information, I'm looking down the list of names. Is there anyone that feels comfortable answering that question with Marlene, please?
Hi, I'm Marlene Michelson. I'm the Executive Director for the County Council, Montgomery County Council. And yes, we have had individuals indicate to us that they have changed party. Unofficially, obviously, they haven't put that on the record, but there have been some last minute switches away from Democrat to typically unaffiliated or sometimes even independent. I can't tell you exactly how prevalent that is, but I can tell you that has happened. And in fact, in a recent case, we had someone switch party, apply for a position, didn't get it. A vacancy came up on the same board, switch party again to the party where there was currently a vacancy. And I don't think that's certainly the intent of what should happen here.
Thank you, Marlene. Other questions, comments, concerns from the delegates? No. So I suppose we're in a place to move the amendments if silence means people are in agreement.
Madam Chair, would you like me to move the amendment?
Sure. If you would like to move the amendment, Delegate Foley, I will clear the runway for you here.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, I move the amendment that I just read out, and that was distributed to the committee this morning, to the bill MCPG 109-23.
Thank you. All those in favor of moving the amendment? Or Jennifer, it looks like you're saying something.
I'll second that. I'll second the amendment.
There we go. Perfect. I knew I was missing a step. I'm a little rusty in the interim. All right. All those in favor of moving the amendment, signify by raising your hand. There we go. All right. The amendment passes. Corman, are you raising your hand to move the?
Sorry, I still had my hand up from voting for the amendment.
All right. All right. Delegate Foley?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to move MCPG 109-23 as amended.
All right. All those in favor signify by raised hand.
Madam Chair, we need a second. I'll second that.
Oh, sorry. I keep forgetting the second. I'm sorry. This is my bad.
I'm seconding.
Perfect. All right. All of those in favor. All right. There we go. Yay. We passed our first bill. Wonderful.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, subcommittee members.
Thank you. Despite my rocky ceremonial start with the counting here, we're in a good place. All right, so let's take up the task force bill that was introduced by Senator Kramer, MC 104-23. I think it's important to talk about this bill and also the transparency bill, MCPG 105-23, kind of in conjunction because they're of a similar spirit. You know, I think my biggest takeaway from the hearing on Thursday was that there is a lot of work to be done here, seemingly. And I would say it appears that the majority of the work isn't necessarily a function of the staff's success. It's a matter of leadership and personalities and issues that need to be worked out on that level. And so to me, there certainly is a lot of transparency measures that can be reviewed. I think this provides a vehicle to go a little bit further than the bill and gives us a good faith effort to really do some investigatory work to like how we can improve this. But in terms of the task force bill, I'm less enthusiastic about that because it feels as though we're researching a solution and not really looking holistically and comprehensively at all of the issues that might be occurring that could need fixes. And so with that preamble, I'll open it up to members of the committee who seem very quiet. Okay, Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my first question is, has Park and Planning met with the sponsor? I know it seems like the sponsors work closely with the county government, the county executive branch, although they have representatives here and can correct me if that's mistaken. But do we know if they've been communicating about potential issues with the bill, members of the task force and so forth?
So let me refer to the staff for the commission to answer that question. I can tell you that the sponsor of the bill has not communicated anything to me one way or another. So I have no idea where he's at and what his conversations have looked like. Is there someone here from the commission that would like to answer that question with confidence?
Can you repeat the question? The question was, has the sponsor communicated with what authority?
Has
Madam Chair?
has he had discussions with commission staff? But Delegate Corman, if you'd like to expand.
Yeah, so it seems like the purpose of the bill is to look at whether to remove or to move the Park and Planning functions from a bi-county commission to the county executive branch. It seems clear to me, although again, the county executive has representatives here, you can correct me if this is wrong, but it seems to me that the senator has clearly spoken to the county executive branch about this. I'm trying to determine if he's spoken to Park and Planning about this because there might be changes to the bill as a result of those conversations. For example, who should be on the task force, what they should be studying, questions like that. So I'm just wondering if those conversations between the sponsor and Park and Planning had happened.
Yes, my name is Jordan Buckham Colbert. I'm the Government Affairs Liaison and I work in the Office of General Counsel. And no, we have not. We have had a conversation to set up a meeting with the sponsor, and our efforts prior to the delegation hearing last week failed. We didn't get a chance to come up with a convenient time, but we will be pursuing a meeting with him subsequently to discuss the bill. So we have not had, the commission has not had conversation with the sponsor as of yet. But that's a work in progress.
Excuse me, Delegate Corman, do you have follow-up questions?
Not this time, Madam Chair. That just seems like an important, conversation to be had. And, I guess maybe I do have one, which is, should we get some of that input here about what, if this bill were to happen, what does Park and Planning think should be looked at? Or maybe they want to talk to Senator Kramer about that first. I defer to you, Madam Chair, but that seems like a pretty important conversation that needs to take place.
Sure.
For the bill.
Yeah, I mean, I know when any bill that you are taking seriously, you do your due diligence and you speak to all the stakeholders to increase the chances of it passing in the way that you like. So yeah, I guess let's open it up for that conversation here, Jordan.
Sure. If each bill would have its own response and feedback. We do have 4 bills that are commission related. The one you just talked about, the political parties, we've submitted position statements for each of the legislative bills. 2 of the bills we are not taking a position on, but we provide informational support to the delegation. As it relates to, depending on which bill you want to pursue first, would you like to talk about the task force bill or the trust and trust? Okay, so as it relates to the task force bill, we are in opposition of that bill, but we have experts, some of our directors from the Park and Planning Division to follow up on their thoughts regarding that bill. And then we have another expert, our executive director, Asantha. She will touch base on the arbitration bill and anything else on the latter part in terms of the restructuring bill. We can follow up as well. So I invite my colleagues, Tanya Stern and Mike Riley, to touch base on the task force bill, please.
I'm Tanya Stern, Acting Planning Director at the Montgomery County Planning Department. And as Jordan noted, we are in opposition to this bill. We do not feel that making amendments to this bill will address our concerns about the restructuring task force bill. From our position, just collectively, we feel that it is a solution. The bill presumes a solution to a problem that has not been identified. We have very grave concerns about the premise of the bill, which ultimately seeks to identify the feasibility of how to remove my department and the Parks Department from the commission and move it under county government. That is a very severe step. And has a very significant and would have a very negative impact on our departments and the commission as a whole, which is a bi-county commission. I think that some of the testimony that we heard spoke to this bill being a way to look at potential solutions to address issues or questions related to operations or other matters. And it's simply a study bill, but the reality is that it sets up as a premise that our organization should not be a part of the commission and to look at how to remove it. And as I noted, we are in complete opposition to that premise. We feel that our 2 departments are very successful as part of the commission structure. As I noted in my testimony, I have worked in an executive branch in local government when I worked for the government of the District of Columbia. So I'm very familiar with how that system works. I'm very familiar with how the commission's structure works. And my experience in the 4 years that I've worked here is that the commission structure works very well. I think if there are conversations or a desire to have conversations about more transparency in terms of processes, are there ways to make certain processes work more efficiently? Those are conversations that take place all the time. There are efforts that my department has taken to improve processes, the Parks Department as well, the commission across the board. But those are actions that can take place at any time and doesn't require a task force to look at restructuring the organization as a whole. So I will stop there and allow my other colleagues to make any comments.
Thank you, Ms. Stern. Are there any other commission staff that would like to comment on?
Yes, please.
Question?
Yes,
Mr.
please,
Riley,
Chairman.
go for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and allowing us to participate today. I'm Mike Riley. I'm the director of the Parks Department. I've been with the Park and Planning Commission my entire career, more than 35 years. And I just want to answer Delegate Corman's question, which was already answered, but to put a point on it, Senator Kramer never spoke with any of the leadership at Park and Planning about the intent or purpose of this bill before it became public. As Tanya said, from the departmental perspective, the Parks Department and Planning Department, we're not perfect. We're always seeking ways to self-improve, but we think we've been delivering pretty great services to the residents in Montgomery County. I know you heard from a lot of residents in the hearing that for one reason or another had an experience with Park and Planning that caused them to come out and testify that we should be dismantled or blown up in some way. We have a large legion of advocates that out of respect for the delegation, we did not mobilize. We did not want to keep you up till 2 or 3 in the morning hearing from our supporters like the Friends of Brookside Gardens or Little Falls Watershed Alliance or WABA. But I just want the committee to know we do have a lot of people who speak up on a regular basis about their appreciation for the services provided by the Parks Department. So I'll just close saying, you know, the word study seems pretty harmless. We agree that we should be introspective and look at how we can improve and be more transparent. I know Council President Glass spoke to that in his comments at the county council, that while he maybe didn't think that we needed state legislation, that because of the recent affairs with the planning board, we certainly need to be introspective and look at ways the organization can improve itself. And I agree with that. But the other part of the bill, of course, the foregone conclusion that the solution is that the agency should be moved into the executive branch of county government, is what really puts a chilling effect on the more than 1,000 employees that work on the Montgomery side in park and planning. We had been through a similar study with the Montgomery County Park Police about 10 years ago. After considerable studies, it was determined that there would be significant upfront costs to move just the county police division into the county government. And you saw in the senator's amendments coming into your hearing, you immediately realized that and took the park police out of the equation so that the FOP did not testify to you in opposition. There were three, the FOP rep and two represented officers were there, and they withdrew their testimony because the police came out. So I will just close and say, yes, we want to look at how park and planning can continuously improve itself, but no, we completely disagree with the fact that there's a foregone benefit of moving us into the county government and breaking up the commission. Thank you for listening.
Sure, thank you. Delegate Corman, I see your hand up, and then I want to recognize Delegate Foley because she had her hand up earlier.
Let me cede to her because I've been talking a lot and I'll hear from her first, if that's all right, Madam Chair.
Sure, that's fine. I don't know if you wanted to finish out the comments. Delegate Foley.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't need to speak any longer. My comments and questions were addressed. Thank you.
Sure. Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for all the questions. One of the premises, I think, of the bill is to increase oversight and accountability. So I guess a question for either the head of the planning department or the head of the parks department is, do you have a sense of how often you are before the county council or county council committee versus an executive branch department for questioning, to present, views, whatever it is?
Tanya, I'll go first. I mean, the first thing I'll say is that every 6 months we do sit in front of the entire council and go over our work program, both our accomplishments over the last 6 months and our work program for the next 6 months. It's usually about a 2-hour discussion. And then I would say that I think we're in front of the committees equally between parks and planning, if not on a greater basis, as the county government.
Ms. Stern?
Yes, I agree with Director Riley's statement. We are before the county council, whether at the committee level or the full council, on a regular basis, sometimes a weekly basis, because there are a lot of planning related matters that go to the council, whether they are plans or other bills or other initiatives that we have involvement in. But we also meet with county agencies on a regular basis as well, on a weekly basis. Particularly with our Development Review Committee, which our department runs and includes representatives from multiple departments, including executive branch departments, utilities, and development applicants to talk through development proposals that will be going to the planning board. We also hold regular meetings with certain agencies on a regular basis. We have a monthly coordination meeting with the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. I was in a meeting just last week with the Department of Permitting Services to talk about some regulatory review matters. So, we're before both the council and the executive branch, again, on pretty much a weekly basis. It's pretty, we have very frequent communications with both sets of entities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it's appropriate, well, first of all, it looks like Mr. Weissman wants to speak, so happy to cede to him. But if it's appropriate, I'd be curious to hear from Ms. Michelson about the comparison between executive branch departments and the park and planning in terms of their presence before what I think is supposed to be the venue for oversight in Montgomery County, which is the legislative branch.
Gotcha. We'll go to Ms. Michelson and then to Mr. Weissman just to continue on with the thread.
Yes, thank you. The Park and Planning Commission is an independent agency, but the planning board members are appointed by the council and they are incredibly responsive to the council. So anytime there is an issue before the commission, they are coming to the council to share that, to report on it. And then they have the oversight of the entire now 11-member body, monitoring what they're doing, raising issues. I have to share a little, a short story, which was I was hired by the council over 30 years ago because the county executive was just given the new authorities in the planning process. And the council wanted to figure out how to deal with that. Most of you probably know that only lasted a few short years before then executive Neil Potter, who had been on the council, ran on the platform that the planning functions needed to be independent and not under the control of a single executive. And so he ran, was elected, and immediately made sure that the full authority for appointments and oversight went back to the council to keep it independent. I'm not sure, Mr. Corman, if I've answered your question directly, but I will say, and just in closing, and then perhaps you can follow up if I haven't hit it, is that the Planning and Parks Department are incredibly receptive to what they hear from the council and the direction of the council. In the executive branch, staff follow the lead of the county executive. And one of our concerns, should these departments be moved to the executive branch, is they then have a single boss who is determining the direction they will take. They no longer become independent. Their boss is the CAO, who responds to the county executive. And that is one of the reasons that Neil Potter felt so strongly it had to go back to the council, so the 11-member body would be providing oversight.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson. We'll go to Mr. Weissman.
Appreciate the opportunity, Madam Chair. Jake Weissman, ACAO for the county executive. I'll be quick. I'm not here speaking on behalf of Senator Kramer. I'm not sure why Parks and Planning has not sat down with Senator Kramer yet. And obviously, no institution is going to be interested in seeing change for itself. Any change to an institution can be disruptive or volatile to an institution. So I would expect a institution, any institution, a state department, a county department, a state-run entity such as Parks and Planning to be resistant to change. But that's why the General Assembly is here. That's why the delegation is here to help guide this unique state agency within the county. And I do think nobody here can say with 100% straight face that everything is going smoothly. Obviously, there continues to be press about issues within planning and the need to look into the functions and roles of planning, which is why the county executive supports the bill. I said on Thursday night, and want to be clear, the county executive is not looking for planning or parks to be in the executive branch. He is a former council member and strongly supports the idea of the council continuing the oversight of land use issues. And we trust the delegation committee and are looking forward to working with you on amendments to narrow the focus of this task force and to take away some of the bias that some of the staff at planning has raised. But fundamentally speaking, and I know we'll talk more about this with the transparency legislation, there are things that deserve to be looked at and deserve to be fixed. And unfortunately, the place to go, or fortunately, the place to go for that is the delegation, as this is a state entity. I did want to introduce, if I may, Madam Chair, I brought with me today Meredith Wellington. You might know Miss Wellington. She's a former member of the planning board. and currently works in our office, and wanted to, if it's okay, just defer to her to give kind of her thoughts, if that would be all right.
Ms. Wellington, we'll give you the floor as long as you can speak to the question that's at hand.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you. And I think I was back there 30 years ago with Marlene, but because I've done a lot of planning before and after being on the planning board. But yes, I served 8 years on the planning board from 1999 to 2007. And at that time and right now, the overriding concern and issue with planning is the slowness and complicated nature of the development review process. I have seen many changes in the process and new names for the approval documents, but the problem remains the same. And that has been the concern of the county executive. He even asked if the council could review it as part of a general plan in June of 2021. And then I'll be brief, but the other concern is the lack of authority and the ability of the council to actually take action with respect to planning board members. Right now, the only thing they can do is terminate. And we could ask Marlene, but it was my understanding that when the chair was suspended for alcohol, drinking alcohol on the premises, that he had to agree to a suspension because the council didn't have the authority to impose a lesser punishment. It's either fire or give a pat on the hand. They don't have ability to enforce the suggestions they may make in various open sessions or in private.
I'm happy to respond if the chair wants me to.
Sure, Ms. Michelson. Thank you, Ms.
Yes,
Wellington.
I would have to disagree with that characterization. I think because the planning board members are in fact very responsive to council members, the council was able to consider different forms of discipline when it needed to that would be appropriate and fitting to the situation. We had an unprecedented situation with no real precedence, but I don't think at any point the council felt that it did not have the ability to try and either reprimand and discipline employees in a way, or planning board members in a way that would successfully get the message across, or if they needed to, remove them. And as you know, like I'm kind of perplexed by people saying that the council didn't have the ability to exercise oversight, because when it realized that things had reached a critical point, it determined that the entire planning board needed to be removed. And it took that action incredibly swiftly from the first day there was an issue reported to them until the day that they asked the entire planning board to resign. It was a very quick set of measures and a very quick reestablishment of interim members who could keep things going. And I'm very grateful to the staff there and to Tanya Stern and Mike Riley and their staff, who basically kept things going without missing a beat. I mean, if you think about the nature of what has happened and the impact on the organization, they have done an amazing job of continuing the work they needed to do. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson. Delegate Corman, for what is potentially our last question on this bill, unless there's other delegates who want to chime in too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, first of all, I think we've blended into the other bill because I think the task force bill doesn't really get at this question, because even if you moved these functions to the executive branch, I don't think we want the county executive to be able to treat the planning board members on the executive branch as department heads who can just be fired for a political disagreement. So I think you'd still have to work that issue out. I guess my question, though, is really about that development review question that Ms. Wellington raised, because it's the subject of, I think, a lot of interest, but not by most of the witnesses we heard from during the hearing. And of course, the bill itself isn't really specific about the functions it's looking to see transferred or streamlined or improved. So I guess I thought it might be helpful if we could hear from Park and Planning about that side of the issue, which is this development review process, potential redundancies, or the length of time it takes relative to county government, if that's appropriate, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Corman. Ms. Stern, I see your hand raised. Was that in response to this question?
Yes, it is.
Sure. Thanks.
So I think it's important to for the delegation to understand that our department is very mindful of and works very closely with our county agency partners to look at ways to streamline the development review process. We have undertaken a number of initiatives such as speed to market. We have the ability for development applicants to bring sketch and site plan and preliminary plans and site plans to the board. Concurrently, we also, I mentioned previously the Development Review Committee that meets on a weekly basis that involves multiple entities to review development proposals. We held a DRC retreat in September that included representatives from agencies, utilities, as well as the development community to look at the DRC process and to identify even further ways to shorten those processes to make it even more efficient. And there are a number of recommendations that have come out of that retreat that we have already started to implement. So I think from our perspective, we heard the testimony about concerns about the length of time for the development review process, but the reality is that we've already made a number of steps to improve those processes, and we're constantly looking for ways to make them more efficient. And I also wanted to note that NAIOP, which is one of the organizations that represents the development community in Montgomery County, we meet with them on a monthly basis to talk about our projects, to talk about the review processes. So we have other ways outside of specific regulatory items to talk with the development community. And I also wanted to note that NAIOP provided testimony in opposition to the task force bill itself. So I think that speaks to our experience, which is that we have very good relationships with the development community and a lot of open communications with them. And so if they do have concerns, they reach out to us on a regular basis. We have other ways of having these conversations with them. And the fact is we have taken actions to improve these processes.
I'll go to Mr. Riley next. Thank you, Ms. Stern.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. The delegation received written testimony from the outgoing director of the Department of Permitting Services, who works for the county executive. Her name is Mitra Pedoim, and Mitra worked for both the Park and Planning Commission for many years, and then the last 3± years as the director of DPS and appointee of the county executive. And on this issue of streamlining development, I would just ask the committee members to please make sure you do take a look at Mitra Pedoim's testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Ms. Wellington, and then Mr. Weissman, and Ms. Baucom-Colbert too.
Thank you. I will be very brief. I just want to say that I really appreciate what Ms. Stern had to say about the efforts that are being made now to speed up development review. But unfortunately, when I was on the commission, and I left in 2007, they were making similar kinds of efforts. And between 2007 and now, I'm sure I could go and catalog again many efforts. And unfortunately, it hasn't worked the way it should. And this is the county executive's main concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wellington. Mr. Weissman?
Appreciate it, Madam Chair. And as I said Thursday night, this isn't about the planning board staff or planning board members, but this is the number one issue that I have heard consistently from developers in my 14 months of being here. And I'd be genuinely surprised if no one on planning side has heard this concern. And there's been plenty of issues in the executive side that we have and continue to fix, but it is the number one issue out there. And that's why we're asking this delegation to work with us, work with planning, create a balanced task force that looks at this issue. We have a vehicle here, and we shouldn't waste this opportunity to, in a clear and transparent manner, address this issue that is seen by many, many people in the economic development world in Montgomery County as a reason that Montgomery County is seen as less friendly to economic development than other areas around the state and the region. We're not looking to transfer ownership to the executive branch, but we do have this opportunity to have a public and transparent conversation about how to fix this issue. And we're hoping the delegation will consider that.
Thank you, Mr. Weissman. Ms. Baucom Colbert, excuse me. I'm sure you get that a lot.
It's okay. Thank you. I appreciate you. I just wanted to further iterate that in our conversations with a few delegation leadership members, we have shared that this type of restructuring effort through legislative process has happened on more than one occasion. This is not anything that is new. There have been studies done. There have been task force that have been proposed to be implemented. And we are just letting you know that some of these issues of concern can be addressed outside of legislation. And we urge you to, provide an unfavorable report, because those are things that we can discuss and work on as a body and as a whole. And I also wanted to reiterate that we have reached out to the sponsor and we have tried to initiate a meeting. The timing just was not right for both parties, and we're still trying to pursue those efforts. So we've reached out multiple times to have that touch base, as we have done with various delegation members, and will continue to do so. Thank you very much, and let me know if you have any other questions as you move on to the next bill.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Delegate Charkoudian with your hand up, and then maybe Ms. Stern can respond to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that I think we're still on the task force bill. I have thoughts on the.
Yes, we are. We have
Okay.
not moved to transparency.
Okay, because there's a little bit of back and forth between them, because I have some comments on that one as well, but I'll stick to the task force bill. So what I'm hearing, Mr. Weissman, is you're talking about the streamlining of the process, and Ms. Wellington, you're saying that conversation's been going on for a while, and we're hearing about some progress that's been made. I think that there's probably something there that is worth paying attention to and working on and looking at. I'm concerned that the bill itself doesn't really address that. The task force bill doesn't really talk about that. And so I'm trying to figure out if that's an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think there's some validity to that issue. And it sounds like the commission staff members here believe so as well and are working on it. And so to the extent that that's true, maybe there's some way that the delegation is able to support that process. I'm interested in hearing about how that could happen. I'm just concerned that I don't see that that's really in the task force bill. And so I'm wondering if there's another vehicle or way to support that effort. And so I guess, Ms. Stern, if you want to, you mentioned that that's a process that has begun or been focused on. I don't know if you want to talk more about where that's at, and if it's possible that over time, working with the county executive's office, we might be able to hear about the progress on that, get reports, as a delegation, as a subcommittee, how it's possible to get that work done, because I'm not sure that happens in this bill.
Certainly. I think the fundamental issue is that a bill to potentially restructure an organization is not the mechanism to have conversations about how to make processes more efficient. Again, from our perspective, this task force bill is not intended to do that, it actually is not needed to have those types of conversations and to undertake those types of efforts. I will, point out again, while representatives from the county executive have shared that this is a grave concern for the development community, just want to remind the delegation that NAIOP, which is a representative organization from the development community, are in opposition to this bill. They provided that testimony. And so I think that having said that, again, we've already undertaken a number of efforts to improve our processes. And I think, to refer to something that Director Riley noted earlier, we meet before the county council twice a year solely for our what we call our semi-annual report. That is not the only time we go before the council. Again, we go before the council many, many times throughout the year. But those types of reports are venues where we can talk about how we have streamlined processes, how we've have collaborated on a number of efforts with other agencies. And so perhaps we could do something similar for the delegation, a briefing to give you in more detail, what the efforts have been of how we have worked with the development community and with county agencies and others to streamline our processes so that we can, give you that information. But again, this is not something that requires legislation to do. So we have these other forums where we can, share this information and answer any questions about that.
Thank you, Ms. Stern. Delegate Charkoudian, do you have any follow-up questions, or should we move to the next?
No, thank you.
Sure. Mr. Weissman.
I have my hand raised just to respond to Delegate Charkoudian's question, but
Go for it.
I appreciate it. I think, Delegate, you're right. This task force was from Senator Kramer, not us, was about a more fundamental restructuring than what the county executive is looking for, than what the development community is looking for. However, there is this fundamental question about the development review process. And what I would say to that is, frankly, the delegation is in a unique position to be able to help make something happen, right? To be able to restructure and amend this task force bill to focus on this narrow issue. And if this is something that planning to address in the next couple of months, sine die isn't until April. The delegation has time to work with all parties and amend this legislation and get it to a place where if it's unnecessary, then it's unnecessary. But I don't believe, and the county executive doesn't believe, that we should just throw away this opportunity to make this fundamental change that can improve economic development in the county.
Thank you, Mr. Weissman. Ms. Chang Smith.
Yes, hi there. For the record, Asantha Chang Smith. I'm the executive director for MNC PPC. As my colleague, Ms. Stern, has explained, that this is not something that requires state legislation. It is something that the council can undertake. I think they expressed willingness in their hearing to be able to do that as well. But the one point I want to bring up, which is that our workforce is really specialized in many, many areas. And this is causing a very negative, even the discussions already, a very negative ripple effect. And I just want to just put that to you, because a lot of our employees are your constituencies. They do have some angst and concern when they hear there is a task force to look whether or not, their employers should exist. Right now, as you know, nationally, there is still a lot of grab for talent. We have a lot of talented people in our industry, and people are nationwide, trying to come in and recruit our folks out of there. So I would just ask you to really consider our workforce and consider our constituencies, and just the anxiety, the devastation, and the difficulty we're going to have, even more so in recruiting talent. If folks think, they Google our organization, they see this great job, and the first thing they pick up is press articles about this bill to, disestablish the, commission. So I just want you to consider that in all your conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the delegation? Delegate Foreman.
It's not a question, it's just a request that we hold the bill, Madam Chair.
Sure. Do we have to vote on this, council? To hold a bill, Jennifer?
I don't, you may, but I don't think you have to. I mean, or think of it like the, like on the floor. You can go ahead and he's requested it, and you can go ahead and hold it.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I'll save everyone the hand energy and just say that the bill has been held. All right, thank you, Delegate Corbin. All right, so let's move on to the transparency bill. That's MCPG 105-23. And this bill, I feel a bit more hopeful about. I think there are some elements in there that can be, I don't want to say salvaged, but taken and used as a vehicle to really explore the transparency efforts kind of in a more comprehensive way that needs to happen with the commission. And so I want to open up the conversation for the commission staff to, after having reviewed the bill, are there specific areas just right out of the gate that you feel are positive elements in this bill?
So I'm just going to take a moment to introduce my colleague. Again, we are not taking a position on this bill. There's a position statement, letter of information in your packet that the delegation should have received. But there are some administrative issues and policies that we would like you to take a look at. Our principal counsel in our general counsel office, Emily Vias, is on the line to provide some feedback as needed. Emily, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Sure, Emily. Ms.
Okay,
Vias?
sure. Thank you. We, in general, are not looking at too much of the part of this bill that has to do with the planning board and the additional requirements for ethics review and other things. Those don't involve us directly as the staff. So we are mainly focused on the last portion of the bill that makes modifications to 20-202 regarding posting of things, and then the approving of minutes. And so those two items really relate more directly to our operations. And the way these are worded right now, they don't really work well with regards to how we operate, because we already post staff reports that summarize information and comments from citizens, and those are posted generally 10 to 14 days before the hearing. But the way this is worded, it would suggest it's only 72 hours before the hearing. And we actually accept citizen testimony 12 noon the day before our Thursday hearings. So this would sort of push that back 3 days, as opposed to allowing people more time to submit testimony. So I think the concept of being sure that our staff reports are posted and have information, we do this already. But the way this is structured, I think it would actually impede our ability to get information out to the public in a timely fashion that's meaningful. And we have different types of matters that come before us. Some of them are master plans, which are semi-legislative type things, or zoning text amendments. Some of them are regulatory matters, which are site plans and subdivision plans. And they all have different timelines that run through the zoning code, the subdivision code, and our rules and procedures. So again, the way this is worded, it seems to capture everything that might come before the board, and all of these things have different timelines and different requirements. So I think that the concept of assuring that we're putting things out to the public, we are certainly not against that, but I think the way this is worded, and if we could have some more time to work with you on coming up with a way to do that and to address what the concern is here. As I said, we post things generally 10 to 14 days ahead of time. So not sure exactly where this was intended to get at, but we can work with that if we can have some time to do that. And then as to the minutes being posted, the most recent meeting, so that would suggest that from week to week, we would post the minutes from the prior week. And the reality of that for me as legal counsel is that I review the minutes before they get submitted, as well as the resolutions that go before the board every week. And so the timing of that, since Thursday are our meetings, we then have to prepare minutes, we have to prepare resolutions, and then try to get them on the agenda for the following week. And then you look at the 10-day requirement and other things that have to get posted. There's just not enough time, honestly, sometimes to review all of that and get it all in by the next meeting. But we generally try to do it at least every 2 weeks or so to get the minutes out. We try to do it as timely as we can. But we also want the minutes to be meaningful. And of course, the shorter time you have to do that, the shorter the minutes will be. And certainly as soon as they get approved, we post them. So all of our minutes are available on the website as soon as the board approves them. And so we said we diligently tried to get them out as quickly as we can. But again, having a requirement that it has to happen every week could be very limiting for us and could lead to just shorter minutes because we just won't have the time to make them more substantive. So like I said, I think we work on this, but I'm not sure that would accomplish maybe what's intended. Happy to answer any other questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Baez, for walking us through that area of compromise. And respectfully, I'll ask the question again with a little bit more of a narrow scope. Is there anything in this bill that you think is a good idea?
I think that having more clarity on the, I mean, the beginning part, as I said, we aren't as involved, but having more clarity on what the board members need to do, I think that those are probably good instructions, because then there is no question about what the board can and can't do in terms of outside work, in terms of taking courses, and the training and things like that. I don't think that there's anything harmful in those, and a lot of it has been done anyway, but it wasn't set forth as clearly.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, Ms. Baez. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, in light of the fact that we're holding the other bill, and we just had a very extensive discussion that kind of overlapped both areas. I and listening to Ms. Baez and learning about how the commission operates, and the fact that the sponsor and members of the Planning Commission have not really come to a meeting of the minds on this, I would like to suggest that we also hold this bill for further study and work with the parties to try to get to some consensus on what areas we want to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Foley. So I received notification from council that we do have to vote on holds. And before we do that, I do want to give Delegate Polakovich-Carr a chance to ask her question because she had her hand up, and then we can circle back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have several questions on this bill. And anyone from Park and Planning can feel free to answer these, Ms. Baez or anyone else. So during our public hearing and in terms of our written testimony on this piece of legislation, we did receive a number of pieces of testimony from the public who were expressing concerns about particular aspects of transparency. And I actually want to start with the meeting agendas and other documents that I guess that are posted on the website prior to a meeting. And I do appreciate the information about the 24-hour time period and the concerns about making sure that the public has that flexibility that currently exists. I'm wondering if someone could answer, how is that information pushed back out to the public? So anything that is submitted in advance of a meeting sounds like it's posted on the website. Is there any other options for the public to say, sign up to receive email updates? We do that in our delegation. The county council, other branches of government offer those kinds of email signups. Do you have something comparable?
Ms. Stern, I see your hand up.
Yes, just speaking on behalf of the planning department, we do support and help to assist with the transparency of the planning board's operations for their meetings. Our department once a month puts out a monthly press release that lists all of the upcoming events that our department does. It lists all of the upcoming planning board meetings and includes the link to the planning board website so that individuals can find the agendas, as well as the Historic Preservation Commission meetings. We also use our social media to help promote planning board meetings as well. So we push that information out prior to each planning board meeting because we have a number of folks, who follow us through that mechanism. And we also have e-newsletters that our department puts out. So again, anytime there's an upcoming planning board meeting, any type of public meeting that our department hosts, we always make sure to share that information. And additionally, within the monthly press releases, again, where we list all the upcoming planning board meetings that are coming up with those links, we provide every month a paragraph that explains all the different ways that members of the public can testify at planning board meetings. They can certainly come in person. All planning board meetings are hybrid, so individuals can sign up to testify virtually as well. You can submit written testimony, you can call in. There's a lot of different options, and so we always make sure to include that information as well.
And Madam Chair, if you don't mind if I continue with my follow-up questions.
Oh, please do.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Stern, for that information. It actually would be helpful if you could maybe share some examples of some of those recent email communications with the committee so that we can take a look at those.
Certainly.
Thank you. Let me ask about another area that came up during the hearing about lobbyist registrations. I did take a look at the commission's website, and it does look like there's robust information about who's required to register as a lobbyist, although I was not able to find information about who the currently registered lobbyists are, if there are any. Is that information that is publicly available?
If I could help with that, my name is Deborah Borden. I'm the general counsel for the commission. That information is publicly available, and we have received MPIA requests recently for that information, and it was given out. We are currently working with our IT department in order to create a much more user-friendly portal for our lobbying registration. And we're in the process of signing or entering into contracts in order to get that portal built. We envision that the portal will be a one-stop shop kind of place where you can go and get live updated reports on who is registered. You can go and actually do the registration, and there will be sort of back office automation of that process to make it easier for us, because we're trying to make it so that people can get real-time information without a whole lot of back and forth, sending emails or papers or PDFs, which is sort of old school. We're trying to get away from that and trying to automate these processes that we have. And we think that once that's done, we'll have a much better, more robust portal that will be more interactive, that will be up to date, and will provide all of that information in one place. So we are working on that, and we're hoping to get something up and running in the next 6 months. It may be a little bit longer than that, but we'll see. But we are working on that.
Thank you. That's very encouraging to hear. And then my last area of questions is regards to training. The bill addresses training for members of the Montgomery County Planning Board. Can someone speak to what the current required trainings are, or perhaps additional training offerings that are available on a voluntary basis for members of the Planning Board?
Emily, do you want me to talk about that, or maybe we can tag team that a little bit? Again, Deborah Borden for the record. So the required training, there is a required training that's required by the state of Maryland. It's in a law. It's required to go through the Department of Planning, the Maryland Department of Planning. They prepare a training module for new commissioners or new planning board members, no matter where you are in the state. So there is that training. There is a requirement that at least one member of the planning board has to go through Open Meetings Act training. So there is that, and that's provided by the Office of General Counsel. There is ethics training that is offered by the State Ethics Board. I'm not exactly sure whether that is a requirement at this point or if it's just an offering. We generally do our own ethics training through the Office of General Counsel. We have an entire orientation that we take all of our board members through when they're first appointed. And that includes ethics, it includes procedure and process, it includes a little bit of constitutional information and issues. And we prepare that and give that to all of our board members. We check and make sure that that we're in compliance with the Open Meetings Act requirement, that at least one has gone through that training. That's an online training. And we give them whatever support they need if they still are having issues with that, with that training module. So that is what we do currently. We have recently had, I believe, a requirement, I'm trying to think, for the alcohol training. That's right. We had a specific training dealing with the commission's alcohol policy, and we required everybody, including commissioners, to go through that training. So as different training needs come up, we will require that of our commissioners as well as everybody else. But those are the basics that we have on a regular basis.
Thank you, Ms. Borden. Ms. Balcom Colbert, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to add that if you reference our letter of information, it also indicates that we have workplace safety training, harassment and trainings in risk management, employment free of intimidation, and diversity and inclusion trainings as well here at the commission.
Thank you. Delegate Polakovich-Card, do you have a follow-up?
No, Madam Chair.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I have a question for the commission staff as well. Can you give us a sense of what is currently allowed and not allowed in terms of political activities in practice, like how you see it all playing out?
Okay, I will try that one. So the commissioners, I assume you're talking about commissioners versus employees, but
That's correct.
We can talk about both. So the commissioners have a particular section of the land use article that governs their ethical responsibilities. They also have a section in the general provisions article that also covers ethics and conflict of interest. And so those provisions generally talk about acceptance of gifts, that they can't accept gifts from people who appear before the board. It talks about that they can't rule on something or vote on something that they have a personal stake in, something that is owned or operated by one of their relatives, close relatives, and it defines what that means. So the provisions are out there. Now, the issue as to whether those provisions and how well those provisions apply when a commissioner is involved in political activity, that really is not well covered by the provisions. The provisions are very focused on financial gain. Okay, that's what the provisions are really looking at. You shall not, financially gain from your work as a commissioner. They don't want you using your position to gain, a financial interest in some way. That really is what those provisions are saying, and they're all pretty much saying the same thing. They're not really designed for, and it doesn't appear when you look at them that they were designed for the situation where someone is either running for office or helping someone else run for office. It's like a round peg in a square hole. It doesn't quite fit the situation. So, the way you could look at it is that wasn't what those provisions were designed to address. So maybe there should be provisions to address that. Or you could look at it that wasn't, considered the important issue, that, the important thing that they were looking at was, sort of a form of corruption. They don't want commissioners to use their positions improperly in order to gain a financial interest. And we can send you references to those provisions in the law if you like. Those are
Sure, that would be helpful.
We look at quite often, and but most of the time people either miss the ones in the general provisions article or they miss the ones in the land use article. And they are both, you know, laws that the commissioners have to follow. And so we are very, very much aware of both of them, and they have to follow both.
Gotcha. All right. Any other questions or comments from the delegation? No? Oh, Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on a process piece, I would just, my sense is that there are, you started by saying you were more hopeful about sections of this. I think that there's parts of this that are about changing significantly how commissioners are appointed, and then other parts that are about the transparency. And I would separate those out and would want to have more conversations about the transparency piece. I don't know if there was conversation about holding this bill as well, and I would support that to give us time to kind of work through several of the components that we've discussed. And I just don't know if you've already got some thoughts about what that process might be that we could make sure happens so that we get information so that we can sort of move some of those transparency pieces, or if we need, if we need to develop a plan here, you might already have one. But I just wanted to kind of weigh in on the supporting, I think what you were starting to say about taking some time to flesh out and refine some of the components that seem like they could be helpful.
Yeah, I think in terms of process, we have to be mindful of the holiday and people's schedules of coming and going and such. But I think really the next step for me after we vote on the hold or agree to the hold is really to do the due diligence of digging in and working with all the stakeholders to figure out how do we make this the strongest bill possible in terms of transparency. And so the process to me would be collecting thoughts from all the various stakeholders, and then working probably over the next weeks or so, but hopefully we can get all this resolved before session to figure out what amendments need to be made. I'm open for suggestions about how to streamline that process, because there are so many people that are engaged, but I think it's a stronger bill, having more lines of communication. And I think this has been helpful in kind of getting us there and figuring out what are those, to use my grad school term, what is it, zone of perpetual or possible agreements. So if I remember my capstone right. So I think we're getting there, but I know that there's going to be multiple layers of conversation going forward, and I would hope everyone knows that they're invited to participate in those. Ms. Michelson.
Yeah, I would just caution that as you look at all of these options, you look at consistency across agencies and different bodies, and in particular on the training issue, there are some existing trainings. And so I know it's not the intent here to make this very confusing as to which training you need to take or not, but just understanding what exists. On the political front, I will note that every employee of Montgomery County can be involved in political races. Is there a reason to suggest something different for the planning board? Perhaps, but I think you need to look at what is standing practice in the county, and is there a reason to treat the planning board differently and this planning board differently than other planning boards throughout the state? And so, again, consistency. And finally, I was happy to hear of the idea of the separation between those portions of the bill that might lead to additional training or transparency versus the appointment process. The council is very much opposed to the idea of having the executive appoint members of the planning board. As I said earlier, it should not be a single individual who has this authority, but the entire council, which frequently is looking to balance perspectives on the planning board, and have some members that may be more pro-development, some that may be not as supportive of development, and to have that balance. When you get to an individual making those appointments, it's hard to achieve those objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson. Mr. Weissman.
Appreciate it, Madam Chair. Again, Jake Weissman, ACAO for the County Executive. Just a couple quick things. I wanted just to make clear I'm available whenever, wherever to sit down and discuss these important provisions, as I'm sure Ms. Wellington is as well. There's a lot of good transparency measures on here, a lot of things that I think the delegation can do to restore faith and trust in the planning board. Yes, it might be different than what happens in other jurisdictions, but frankly, what happens in this county with planning is different from every other jurisdiction. If the will of the delegation is that the state board should continue, then I think it's appropriate for the delegation to look at what things the delegation can do to make the state board function in a more transparent manner. I do just want to touch on what Ms. Michelson just said, and I want to be clear about this. We are not looking for a provision that moves the appointment of the board to the county executive. As I said in my testimony on Thursday, we are not even looking for the chair to be appointed by the county executive. We would obviously support that. But if the delegation feels that the chair is too powerful a position, we understand that. However, there is, as Ms. Michelson said, a need for balance. And it's not just balance among the 11 members of the county council. It's also a balance of the county council and the county executive, who was also duly elected by the voters of the county, and yet is the only executive in the state with zero say in planning. Earlier, when we were discussing the earlier bill, Ms. Michelson said that the planning board was incredibly responsive to the council, and that's wonderful. We will love the opportunity for the planning board to be incredibly responsive to the executive as well. And so we're looking for an opportunity to create a bit more of a balance and give the executive, whoever they are, an opportunity to appoint at least one member of the planning board to create a little bit more balance. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Weissman. And just for those who might also be taking notes, what I have written down as areas that have come up in conversation so far that would likely be a further discussion would be the posting issues and the timing of posting, roles of the board members as they pertain to outside work, the revolving door, courses and training, political activity. Those are the things that have come up and seem like they would be discussed further. Delegate Foreman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification. Maybe I'm not as familiar with this as I should be, but does the county executive have the ability to veto planning board appointments, Mr. Weissman?
Appreciate that, Delegate. Yes, the county executive does have the ability, and the council who appoints these planning board members has the ability to override the.
And in fact, today it would take 9 votes to override, but you're supporting increasing that to the 11 votes.
Yeah, we're just keeping this legislation keeps it aligned with the makeup of the council. It used to be 9 members, and so it took 9 votes to override the veto. The council is now 11 members, so we support it being elected.
So if a planning board member was appointed on a 10-to-1 basis and this bill was law, the county executive, could probably have a veto that was sustained.
Correct. The county executive could veto an appointment, but the county executive could not appoint someone of their own. And the legislation has a mechanism for the county council to vote down the county executives.
Okay, but the county executive has something to say about planning board appointments. You would agree a veto is a.
Correct, but not for any members of the planning board who are on the planning board.
Some of them want to be reappointed though, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Corman. Any other questions from the delegation? Nope. All right. So Delegate Foley has asked for a hold, and Delegate Charkoudian suggested it, recommended it as well.
I'll be a second if you need one.
Sure. So council has advised me that typically when someone asks for a hold, it's granted, but you do open it up in case there is anyone who opposes. And so I would ask, does anyone in the delegation oppose holding this bill for further review and work? No? All right. Well, Delegate Foley, your hold is sustained. So delegation members, please be on the lookout in your inbox for next steps. And similarly for folks who were so kind to join us for information today, we'll be in touch to figure out how to work things out as we approach the session.
Madam Chair,
Delegate Corman.
just to be thorough, I'll just renew my call for the first hold in case you want to give people a chance to object to that one.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Is there any opposition to the first hold? No? All right. Well, thank you, Delegate Corman. I appreciate the opportunity to be thorough. I don't like things to be messy, so the more we can keep it tight and consistent. Delegate Foley, I see your hand up.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Just a question, process question. So,
Sure.
and it's just because of my inexperience, and I apologize, but so what is now, so how does this now relate to the process with respect to Prince George's County?
I think, actually, I would defer to council because anything I say is just going to be what I kind of remember about the process.
We're all pretty rusty here. You folks have the first this year because it is going to be an odd session year. You are hearing Parks and Planning first. Once it is voted on by this committee and then also the overall delegation, it then gets sent over to Prince George's. It's kind of like think of it as who's in possession and who's not, because obviously you are going to have the shot at doing amendments first. And they will have to consider those amendments or not before they're done, before there's a final vote on the bill.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the delegation? No? All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time this morning. I think we were only supposed to go to 11, but I guess if you had it on your calendar to 11:30, you get a few minutes back. So to be positive. Ms. Baucom-Colbert, is there a question you had or a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that we're available if you need to contact us. If you have any questions about the arbitration bill, I know we might not have this might not have been on the agenda, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us or reference our position statement. We do have our executive director on the line now to answer any questions if needed, but we just wanted to let you know that we're available.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Well, if I don't see you before you travel, safe travels and happy holidays, and see